In Western terminology, I present to you a man that we are very thankful to have under our saddle blankets. That's Sandburr from San Antonio, Texas, Dr. Herbert Shelton.
After spending all night up last night, all night Sunday night and most of the nights between, I hope I'll be able to finish this talk. Dr. Trawl used to go into his classrooms and say to his students, of all the rooms, the largest room is the room for improvement. I like to think that all of us here are in that room, working for improvement. It is necessary, in order that we attain success in that effort, that we begin at the beginning. That is, that we begin with the young. It would be nice if we could begin with our grandparents or our great-grandparents, but unfortunately we can't turn back the clock of time and do that. You can, of course, begin with yourselves before you have children. But certainly you can begin with your children. And while I am to discuss the subject of nutrition of children, of babies, of children, and of adults, I want to make it clear that the word nutrition, contrary to popular misconception, does not mean food. It does not mean diet. So that in considering the nutrition of an individual at any age of life, we have to consider every factor in the life of that individual that contributes to or enhances on the one hand, or detracts from and impairs on the other hand, nutrition. Now, what is nutrition? It is a process. It is a process of life. In an overall sense, it is a process. If we break it down, we find it to be numerous processes. But to define it, nutrition is the sum total of all of the processes by which raw materials, which you call food and water and air and sunshine and so forth, are transformed into living structure. Any substance that you may take into your body that cannot be transformed into living structure, any substance that cannot become a normal cell constituent, cannot have any part in nutrition. It has no business in the body. On the other hand, any influence or any activity that you may engage in, or any influence to which you may be subjected, that contributes to the process of nutrition in any way, either directly or indirectly, is properly regarded as a part of the nutritive resources of life. And this means that the sleep that I haven't been getting is as much a part of the body's nutritive resources as the food we eat. And that the exercise that you're not getting while sitting there in those chairs listening to us is also an important factor in nutrition. Sunshine and air and water and poise of mind are factors in nutrition. A lack of these things, a lack of fresh air, a lack of sunshine, a lack of mental poise are inhibiting factors in the processes of nutrition. And if the nutritive process is impaired at any step in the overall process, then all of the processes that follow are also impaired commensurately. So that in order to be properly nourished at any age of life, it is essential that every factor that is involved in nutrition be adequately supplied, and that every factor that in any way inhibits or impairs nutrition be avoided. This does not mean, however, as we're being taught today by psychologists, that babies should never be permitted to cry, and that if they cry, give them something to eat to keep them quiet. I think the psychologist would do well to stick to his own pasture and stop trying to feed babies and adults. He does enough mischief with his psychological hokum and his metaphysical soothing syrups without trying to invade fields of which he knows nothing. We begin considering the nutrition of the child before birth. All of the nutritive resources of the mother are at the disposal of the unborn child. Through the medium of her blood, it receives food and water and oxygen. It receives the beneficial effects of sunbathing. It is damaged by the mother's emotional disturbances. I don't mean the child is marked. I mean by upsetting her own nutritive processes. She supplies to that child some proper nutritive resources. I mean that by not eating proper food, she does not supply her child with proper nutritive material. I mean that by denying herself sunbath, the child is deprived of the benefits of the sunbath. I mean that by depriving herself of fresh air, the child is also deprived of the beneficial results of breathing fresh air. To guarantee adequate nutrition, to guarantee efficient nutrition in the unborn developing organism, the mother must take care of her health in every way, not just eat a particular diet. Some of us seem to get the idea that hygiene is fasting and dieting. It is far more than that. It is more comprehensive. It is more inclusive than fasting and dieting. It is essential that the mother take good care of herself in every particular. It is essential that she keep herself mentally and emotionally poised. I would like to call your attention to a statement made by Dr. Weger in his work on the genesis and control of disease, where he says that you're either poised or poisoned. Now that is literally true, and we might paraphrase it by saying also that you're either poised or malnourished. A lack of poise, a lack of mental or emotional poise, interferes with all of the functions of life, not merely with the excretion of waste matter, which he had in mind when he said you're poised or poisoned, but also with the utilization of the nutritive resources of the body, so that you're either poised or malnourished. It is essential that the mother maintain a state of poise, that she be not worried and fearful and fretful and anxious, during the period of pregnancy. Likewise, during the period of feeding her baby on the bottle, she should maintain poise, not because it has any effect on the fluid in the bottle, but because her lack of poise is transmitted to the child, who also becomes unpoised. Now, I emphasize the bottle because we have turned over to the cow, we have delegated to the cow the office of feeding the human infant. And if all of the cows in the country were suddenly to become as incapable of nursing their young as our women think they are, I don't know what would happen to the baby. At least you're lucky in that the cows are still functioning. Actually, the best food in the world for a baby until it is 2 years old is milk from the breast of a healthy human mother. There is no food produced in nature and no modifications of foods produced by so-called science that is equal to that food. That is, the milk produced by a healthy mother. But today, mothers are being practically compelled to go to hospitals to give birth to their children, and they leave the hospital with a can of powdered milk and a formula prepared by the physician, and it is taken for granted by the physician, by the nurse, by the husband, by the members and friends of the family, and by the mother herself, and I assume after 2 or 3 days at least, by the baby, that the baby is not to be nursed at its mother's breast, but is to draw its pap through a rubber nipple that lacks both warmth and emotional comfort for the child. No other influence in the early life of a child has more importance in bringing up that child so that it is emotionally stable than nursing at its mother's breast. Our children today are the victims of child psychologists on the one hand and negligent mothers on the other. The mothers are laying the foundation for neuroses and psychoses, and the psychologists are trying to adjust these babies to a civilization that nobody should be adjusted to. Adjusting man to this thing that we call civilization is like trying to adjust your foot to a shoe that is misshapen and 2 sizes too small. Just as you should make the shoe fit your foot, so we should readjust civilization to fit man. You know, I have hopes that someday, it may be in the distant future, we'll do just that. But I don't think that there are 2% of the American people today who are ready for any basic changes in this madhouse in which we live. And it is a madhouse. But the finest food to get back for the baby comes from the breast of a healthy mother. and the finest care, emotional and otherwise, that that child can receive is from the mother. The finest preparation, the best preparation for emotional and nervous stability in later life comes from nursing at the mother's own breast. A few minutes ago, a lady handed me a piece of paper outside describing the diet that a little baby is receiving, a relative of hers, and asked me to tell her something about it. The baby is 20 months old. For some time it has been receiving foods that should be taken only after the digestive system of that baby has reached a stage in its development in which it is capable of adequately digesting such food. The human infant does not have the mechanical and the chemical equipment to handle most of our solid foods before it is 24 months old. In some instances, it has to be even older than that because many babies do not develop as rapidly as others. But before a child is fed solid food, it should have the necessary tools with which to break down that solid food. I don't mean by that that it should have 2 teeth in front. As I once saw stated in the dental journal, that as soon as the first 2 teeth come in front, the child should be fed solid food. Some of you older people who have lost all of your teeth but 2 ought to try chewing food sometime with just those 2 teeth, and perhaps both of them upper teeth, to see the handicap under which that baby labors in trying to handle such food with just 2 front teeth. The child is physically equipped and chemically equipped. By chemically, I mean the necessary digestive enzymes are being secreted at that time when it has a mouthful of teeth with which to chew solid food. And this child was getting nuts, among other things. And nuts, of all foods, require thorough chewing. A child at that age couldn't possibly do justice to nuts. Yet it was being fed nuts and had been for some time. Among those people that we refer to as primitives, and I do not know why they're any more primitive than you and I, their ancestry probably goes back as far as ours does, and they live in the modern world, even if not in this crazy madhouse, as much as we do. But nonetheless, we call them primitives, and we often refer to them as being backward, meaning that they haven't yet succeeded in producing an atom bomb and a hydrogen bomb, and they're not yet equipped to destroy the entire human race. That makes them backward. But among these people, it is not an unusual thing for a mother to nurse her child for as much as 5 years, and sometimes even up to 9 years. Now, I'm not advocating nursing babies for 5 years. I know some of you babies need nursing even at 60.
Turn the cassette. Turn the cassette. Turn the...
As a matter of fact, that is exactly what the dairy industry has been teaching you for a long time. That even at 90, you still need to nurse. Only you should nurse the cow instead of your mother. At 90, you still need your quart of milk a day. You are to be sucklings all your lives. You are never to be weaned. Of course, you know why they teach that. They have but one aim and object in the production and distribution and sale of milk: your welfare, your health. They're not in business to make profits. Consequently, they tell you that you need milk because they're fully convinced that it's important for you to drink it, for your health and welfare, not for their pocketbooks. As a matter of fact, there are dairymen in the country who are so convinced that you need milk all your lives that they don't drink it themselves. Just like there are bartenders who sell whiskey over the bar every day and are teetotalers themselves. But they are convinced that you need it. Now, I have a friend close by who has a dairy. And a few years ago, I was talking to him about milk production, feeding in its relation to milk production. Having worked in a dairy once upon a time myself, my father had a dairy when I was a kid, I knew what we did in order to increase milk production in our cows. I knew what, if we wanted to dry up a cow so that we could turn her out to pasture, I knew that we also did that very simply. And it was all done by manipulating the feeding of the cow. And I pointed out to him that he was doing the same thing. But I said, when it comes to the human mother, we forget the office of diet in assuring an abundant supply of good milk in the mother's breast. And he agreed with me. And we discussed it. About 4 months later, his wife gave birth to a child, and a couple of weeks after the child was born, I saw the baby taking milk from a bottle. The mother had no milk. But she was eating white bread and white sugar and white rice and these breakfast cereals that you eat in the mornings that stick to your ribs. And that's about all they will do. They make good paste. And she was eating embalmed meats. The one thing that she didn't take was pasteurized milk. Oh yes, he was selling pasteurized milk, but his wife and children were getting unpasteurized milk. She was having her tea and coffee and her Coca-Cola or Dr. Pepper or other poison soft drink. Naturally, on a diet of that kind, she couldn't produce milk that was adequate to meet the needs of the baby. So she had to call upon the Holstein. It is my firm conviction that 95% of the women of America today can, if they will, produce all of the milk for their babies that they require of good quality. And that the only reason a mother says, I don't have any milk for my baby, I have to give it a bottle, is that she doesn't want to nurse her baby and is unwilling to do what is necessary to produce that milk. Some of them say very frankly that if I can fix up my milk in the morning, I can fix up several bottles and I can put them in the refrigerator, and I can leave the bottles and the baby with the maid, and I can go out and play bridge or go to the theater or eat chocolates at a club, and I don't have to be home on time to nurse the baby. So they give the baby plenty of pasteurized milk. It's getting now where you can't get any other kind. They give the baby plenty of pasteurized milk to supply plenty of calcium for its bones and its teeth. And by the time it's 2.5 years old, they're taking it to the dentist to repair those wonderful teeth that are produced by that wonderful pasteurized milk. By the time they're 14 or 15, often they don't have any teeth left. They're so full of plugs that all you can see is the plugs in the mouth with a little border around them where there's a little tooth remaining. Others are falling down on their job. Biologically, they're missing the boat, and their children are suffering as a consequence. I started a move some years ago, and I adopted as my slogan, "Back to the wash tub." I thought it would be a wise thing to get women out of the factories and out of the sweatshops where they have escaped to in order to be liberated, in order to be emancipated. I mean, in other words, they have become wage slaves of the exploiters, and that means that they're free. I wanted to get them back somewhere where they could actually take care of their children instead of having to turn them over to the school teachers. Do you know that it's said among the school teachers today that we're nothing but babysitters? We're taking care of the children of these parents so they can go out and have a good time. And you got them in school at a time when they ought to be out in the yard playing, out in the fields and in the forest catching bugs and being bitten by snakes and things of that kind, growing up as human beings. They're in the classroom, sitting hour after hour, drawing pictures and coloring pictures and doing other little nonsensical things. Oh, it's education, I know. But I don't know what it's education for, nor who gets the education. We're complaining now that Russia is doing in 5 years more in educating their children than we do in 11. But we are still educating them. When they come home, they sit down in front of the television and they learn of all the wonders of tobacco and of beer and of coffee. The coffee you drink if you owned all the coffee in the world. If I owned all the coffee in the world, I would set fire to it. I wouldn't drink it. But the children are really getting an education over television. Undoubtedly, the worst evil that has ever come into the American home, worse than the radio was, because it involves visual conditioning along with verbal conditioning of the children. And whereas most children would rather go out and play than to listen to a radio, many of them would rather sit in front of the television and watch the pictures than to go out and play. And this is the kind of thing to which your children are being subjected. I think the next thing I shall do after we get Hygiene properly launched is start a campaign or start a movement to abolish television. Or if we can't abolish it, transform it. And instead of using it as an exploitation medium for the breweries and the tobacco manufacturers and the patent medicine manufacturers, use it for some type of constructive work. Now, I'm going to assume that you're not nursing your baby, and I think I'm going to be right in most instances. And that you're going to feed the baby out of a bottle. If you do so, you should see to it that you get unpasteurized, unstandardized, and unhomogenized milk from healthy cows. I challenge you to find a healthy milk animal anywhere in the country. It is common knowledge among veterinarians that the dairy cow is a pathological creature. And it's milk from these pathological animals that you're feeding your babies because you don't want to take the trouble to do it yourself. It's so much nicer to play bridge. If you can find that kind of milk, however, we may call it second best as an item of food for the baby. But the baby should not be fed the enormous quantities of food that are commonly given to them. We are so in love with little butterballs that we're not happy unless baby is putting on weight excessively. And we are very proud not only to be able to announce that the baby weighed 9 pounds at birth, but that it weighed 15 pounds when it was a month and a half old, which means it's mostly blubber. Not a healthy baby, not a baby that is strong and properly developed. Even that kind of feeding and that kind of putting on of or laying on of fat retards the mental development of the baby. Milk may be fed to the baby whole. If you have milk from cows in which there is a great amount of cream, such as the Guernsey and the Jersey, it will usually be well to take off part of the cream. There is no need to add anything to it. No calcium, no water, no other additives. Nor is there any need to feed baby on these packaged vitamins, vitamin tablets. They're of no value. And there's actually more vitamin value in a glass of whole unpasteurized milk from a healthy cow, or in the juice of a stalk of celery, than you can get from a whole train load of those pills that you pay such prices for. If the baby is being fed from the mother's breast, and the mother is healthy and producing the proper kind of milk, there is no need for any other food to be fed to that baby before it is 2 years old. If mother's milk is not adequate, or if it's being fed upon cow's milk, then it should be supplemented with fruit juices. I prefer giving one feeding of acid fruit juice, commonly orange juice, sometimes tomato juice, at one time of day, and the juice of a sweet fruit, such as fresh grapes or some other fruit in season, at another time of day. 3 to 4 feedings. And I've known of babies to be brought up on 2 feedings of milk a day, and they actually outstripped some of the overfed youngsters in growth and in development and in mental alertness and in health. But 2 to 3 feedings a day of milk is enough for that baby. When a child has developed to the point where it has a mouthful of teeth, where there is chyle in the saliva, where the starch-splitting enzymes in the intestine are present, and where all of the other enzymes required for the digestion of solid foods are present, it is time to begin to feed it solid food. But you do not make an abrupt change from the exclusive milk diet over to an exclusive solid food diet. There is a transition period seen in all mammals in nature, during which time the developing organism changes over from the exclusive milk diet to the exclusive raw food diet, solid food diet. There comes a time then when the young animal is weaned And in nature, that animal never takes milk again so long as it lives. Whether it's an elephant that may live to be 60 or 70 years old, or an animal that doesn't live that long, when once weaned, there is no more milk for the animal. It lives from that time on other types of foods. And that is the normal way of feeding the human child. After it is weaned, there is no longer that need of a quart or 2 quarts of milk a day. From that time on, the child may be fed adequately upon solid food. The adult may be fed adequately upon solid foods without the addition of milk. The only thing that is required from that time on is that the food be of the proper kind, that it be properly prepared, and that it be properly combined. Now, we're not going to discuss food combining because we talked about it for a brief time last night. And if you were not here to hear the talk on food combining, then we have a little book on the subject back there on the table which you may purchase before going out. Learn how to properly combine your foods for yourself and for your children, because it is one of the most important subjects in feeding. In addition to feeding your child properly, see to it that it gets from early in life. I begin babies taking sun baths by the time they're 24 hours old. From early in life, see that your child gets sun baths. See that it gets fresh air. Take its clothes off and put it on the floor, on the pallet or somewhere where it can kick and tumble and roll and exercise itself. When you put the baby to bed, don't put it on its back. Face down is the way the baby should be brought up from birth. Face down, with its head turned to one side so that it can breathe. It's amazing how much more rapidly they develop, how much stronger the back and the legs and the arms develop, and much in this position than lying on the back, merely kicking up into the empty space as they do. Babies should be kept clean, and that means that they should be bathed at whatever intervals are necessary to keep them clean. Once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. They can get dirty very often. They should be kept clean. They should be kept dry. Anybody who finds it necessary to dust their babies with talcum powder in order to prevent chafing is simply not keeping the baby clean. Talcum powder should not be put on the baby, not any more than they should be given a grease bath at birth. As the child grows up, it should continue to have fresh air and sunshine and exercise along with its proper food, and only thus may that child be adequately nourished. Now, I notice some of you are getting up and going out. I guess you're getting tired, and I don't blame you. You've been sitting here for a long time. Oh, it's the hike. Well, it's all the same to me whether you're tired or want to go on a hike. What I'm going to point out is that perhaps I had better break off at this point and urge you all to be back here this evening on time.